The day my backyard turned into a battlefield and a family legacy was unearthed. All right, buckle up, folks, because what I'm about to share with you is one of the wildest experiences I've ever had. If someone had told me this story, I probably wouldn't have believed them. But it happened to me just a few weeks ago. My name is Marcus Bennett, and I live in what was once a peaceful suburban neighborhood in Maplewood Heights. Emphasis on once. The beginning of the end, or so I thought. I bought my house about a year ago. Beautiful little two-story with a wraparound porch, a big yard, and one of its most advertised features, an in-ground swimming pool. At the time, it sounded like the cherry on top. A pool. What could go wrong? As it turned out, a lot. The pool was ancient. The liner was cracked, the filtration system was outdated, and the thing leaked like a sieve. I spent months trying to repair it. Every paycheck went toward water bills and maintenance, and it became this black hole for my money and sanity. Eventually, I threw in the towel. I decided to fill it in and turn the space into something more my speed. A stone patio with a fire pit and maybe even a grill. I had a whole blueprint sketched out. I was pumped. The morning the construction crew showed up with bulldozers and jackhammers, I took the day off work. This was a milestone moment, and I wanted to be there to supervise. The guys started early, tearing up the cracked concrete, draining what was left of the water, mostly sludge at this point, and turning my backyard into a noisy construction zone. Most of my neighbors were understanding. They knew how much trouble the pool had been for me. Well, almost all of them, except for one. Enter Vicky Hawthorne. Now, I hate using stereotypes, but if the shoe fits, Vicky was the definition of that neighbor. Perfectly styled platinum hair, oversized designer sunglasses, yoga pants that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage, and an attitude thicker than molasses in January. She lived next door, and up until this point, had never spoken to me. Not once. Occasionally, she'd shoot me a disapproving glance when I mowed the lawn in a tank top. But other than that, we were strangers. At least we had been. Around mid-morning, just as the crew was really getting into the demolition, I heard it, a high-pitched shriek that cut through the rumble of machinery like a knife. I turned around, and there she was, standing at the edge of my yard, her face twisted in righteous fury. "What do you think you're doing?" she demanded. Her voice was sharp enough to shatter glass. I wiped my hands on my jeans and tried to stay calm. "Filling in the pool," I replied evenly. "It's old, it leaks, and it's been costing me a fortune. I'm replacing it with a patio." Her eyes widened. "You can't do that," she exclaimed. "That pool is an amenity. I use that pool." I blinked. "I'm sorry, you use my pool?" "Yes," she huffed like I was the idiot here. "I've always come over to swim when it gets hot." "You're going to rebuild it, right?" "It's practically part of the neighborhood." That was my first red flag. I tried to stay polite, but firm. "It's my property, my pool. I'm within my rights to fill it in." And that's when things spiraled into the twilight zone. Vicky goes off the deep end. Without another word, Vicky crossed her arms, spun on her heel, and marched right toward the construction zone. I shouted for her to stop. This was an active site, after all, but she barreled past me like a woman possessed. She was muttering something about property values and community resources as she went. Then she did something I'll never forget. She started undressing. Right there, in broad daylight, in front of me and a half-dozen construction workers. She peeled off her expensive workout gear to reveal a neon pink bikini underneath. I swear, I almost choked. "Ma'am," I said, try to regain some semblance of control over the situation. "You can't be here. This is dangerous." But it was like she didn't hear me. She kept yelling about how I was ruining the neighborhood and how I was going to pay for this. Then she strutted, over to the half-filled pool, climbed down into the mud, and sat there, splashing around like it was her private resort. By this point, the construction crew had stopped working. They were openly watching now, equal parts amused and bewildered. One of them, a guy named Luis, walked up to me and said, Marcus, you might want to come see this." The discovery that changed everything. Luis led me over to the far side of the pool, near where they'd been digging. Sticking out of the dirt was something metallic. We brushed away more soil, and uncovered what turned out to be an old, rusted box. The thing looked ancient. Intricate carvings decorated the surface, though they were worn with time. Curiosity got the better of me. We pried it open carefully. Inside was a bundle of documents tied with a faded ribbon and a collection of old jewelry. Rings, necklaces, brooches, each piece more ornate than the last. The craftsmanship was stunning. These weren't just trinkets, they were heirlooms. I carefully untied the ribbon on the documents. The papers were brittle but legible. Deeds, contracts, letters, some dating back to the early 1900s. One name kept appearing over and over again, Nathaniel Carter. That name sounded familiar, and then it hit me like a ton of bricks. Nathaniel Carter was my great-great-grandfather. He was the original owner of the land that the entire neighborhood now stood on. Before it was Maplewood Heights, it was Carter Homestead, and it had been taken from my family through some very shady means. Suddenly, the jewelry wasn't just pretty. It was Carter family jewelry, my family's legacy. And as I kept reading, I found something else, something that made my blood run cold. A lineage of lies. One of the documents was a family tree, tracing the Carter lineage down through the generations. And there, several generations later, was a name, Victoria Hawthorne. Before she married into the Hawthorne name, her maiden name had been Victoria Sinclair. The Sinclairs were the family that had swindled the Carters out of their land a century ago. Her great-great-grandfather had forged documents to claim ownership and had sold the land piece by piece for profit. The entire neighborhood was built on land stolen from my ancestors. And Vicky? She was a direct descendant of the family that did it. Time for a reality check. I walked back over to the pool where Vicky was still wallowing in the mud like some deranged spa guest. I held up the family tree document where she could see it. "Victoria," I said, my voice calm but firm, "you should take a look at this." She glanced up, annoyed at first, but then her expression shifted when she saw her name on the page. "What is that?" she demanded. "It's your family history," I said. "And it turns out your ancestors stole this land from my family." She went pale. "That's not true," she snapped. "That's impossible." "Oh, it's very possible," I replied. "And it looks like the apple didn't fall far from the tree." That's when she lost it. Completely. She lunged at me, tried to grab the documents out of my hands. "Give me that," she shrieked. "You can't prove anything." I dodged her easily. Vicky wasn't exactly athletic, and her flailing made her look more ridiculous than threatening. She lunged again, but this time she slipped on the muddy edge of the pool and fell backward with a loud splat. Justice and closure. The construction crew burst out laughing. I'm not proud of it, but I couldn't help chuckling too. There she was covered in mud, her sunglasses askew, screaming threats about suing me. "Good luck with that," I told her. "I think you've embarrassed yourself enough." A few minutes later, the police arrived. After hearing both sides and seeing the documents, they escorted her home. I chose not to press charges. Honestly, I just wanted her out of my life. But I did contact a lawyer. With the paperwork I found, I had a solid case to reclaim at least part of the land that had been taken from my family. As for Vicky, she sold her house and moved out within a month. Word around the neighborhood is she couldn't handle the shame. A new beginning. The pool is filled in now. My dream patio is nearly finished. I've even turned some of the family jewelry into keepsakes for my sisters and nieces, pieces of our history reclaimed. Every time I sit out there by the fire pit, I think about everything that led to this moment. The fight for what's rightfully ours. The importance of knowing where you come from. And the power of standing your ground. Even when the ground turns out to be a lot more valuable than you ever imagined. So, Reddit, that's my story. A crazy neighbor, a buried treasure, and a long overdue reckoning. What do you think? I'll keep you posted on how the land reclamation goes. Thanks for listening.